So good morning, everyone. My name is Amari Baye. I work with People's Emergency Center, the Bell Project. Both myself and Malkia Ofori Ajikun will be hosting this session or hosting this meeting. We have two special guests today, Colleen Landy from the school district and Deborah Hartranft. We'll introduce them shortly. They have a lot of really helpful information to share, which may be, really valuable for the families that we serve.
Yes, so as you all can see, Joe Willard is not with us today. He is on vacation. He is hiking Appalachian Trail, so we can all picture that and feel, pretend we're with him and enjoying his hike, but his well-deserved vacation. We know how hard Joe is always working. So as Amari said, we Colleen Landy and Deborah Hartranft with us, and so we're gonna jump in. And Colleen, I believe you are going first, right?
That is correct. And I'm just gonna thank you, Malkia. I'm gonna share my screen. And all right, can everyone see my slide? Great. Well, good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. We are here today to talk to you about McKinney-Vento and education for children and youth experiencing homelessness. As Malkia said, my name is Colleen Landy Thomas. I use she, her pronouns, and I oversee the services to students and families who are experiencing homelessness in the district and in charter schools in Philadelphia. If everyone could just mute themselves, I can hear some feedback.
I think it is.
I have been with the district for about 4 years, but my background is actually in shelters and programs for kids who are experiencing homelessness and those in the foster care system. So that is the lens that I come with today. And so our objectives for this short session today are sort of to understand homelessness as it relates to education and McKinney-Vento, understand how ECIA can support students and families, discuss registration, and learn information that you can share with students and families that you work with. And then my colleague Deborah is going to talk specifically about pre-K, Head Start enrollment, and how her team supports McKinney-Vento eligible students. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about, some of you probably, it might be a repeat for you and you may have heard this before, but it's always good to have a refresher about this stuff. And some of you, this may be new information. So with that, I want to make sure that everyone has sort of a shared understanding when we talk about what it means to be homeless under this law. And so, a lot of times folks think when they hear the word homeless that it means someone who might be literally on the street or staying in a shelter, only. But when it comes to this law and the laws governing children in school, a lot of other circumstances can be included, right? Sometimes if you are familiar with the HUD definition of homeless, that would not include folks who are living doubled up. It would include folks who are, street homeless and also living in shelter. But this law includes a lot of other situations. So, and a lot of times also, it's important to note that a lot of times folks who fall into this situation and qualify under this law don't even realize that they do. And so it's sort of our job to make sure that they are aware of it, make sure they're aware of their rights, make sure they're aware of the resources that are out there. And so once you learn about what it is, then you then can take that information and make sure you're sharing it with everyone that you work with. So who are we talking about? So it's children and youth who lack fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. So what are some examples of that? I mentioned before, the HUD definition doesn't include those that are living doubled up. The McKinney-Vento definition does. The majority of the families in Philadelphia, or the majority of the students in Philadelphia that we identify as qualifying, are in this situation: doubled up, couch surfing, living with someone else due to some type of hardship. Sometimes it might include if someone is living in a motel, a hotel, a camping ground, some sort of temporary space due to lack of alternative accommodations for themselves. For example, if someone might have a house fire and they're living in a motel, that they would qualify. It of course includes those folks who are living in shelters and transitional living programs. It could be those who might be living in a public or a private place that's not regularly used for accommodations. So for example, it could be, the subway station, living in a car, an abandoned building, abandoned house. It would also include substandard living situations. So I might be living in an apartment, but that apartment does not have any running water, or it does not have any heat in the winter, any working utilities. That would be included, and those folks would qualify as well. We also include unaccompanied youth, which are children who are not living with their legal parent or guardian, or not in the physical custody of a legal parent or guardian. So for example, this could be the high school kid who runs away from home because maybe they're being abused, and they are couch surfing with friends. They would be considered unaccompanied. But it could also be a 7-year-old kid who maybe mom is in jail, dad's whereabouts are unknown, and so grandma might be caring for that child, and that child would be considered an unaccompanied youth because grandmom's not the legal guardian. We would also include families who might be fleeing domestic violence if they are displaced, or families who are refugees or migrants if they meet that other criteria of being displaced. Oftentimes, also, I just want to point this out, folks mistake McKinney-Vento eligibility and DHS foster care eligibility because they have similar protections. But I just want to point out that if you are working with a student who is in the foster care system, then they would not also qualify for under the McKinney-Vento law. For example, if you have a student who might be living in a shelter, but that shelter is a youth shelter for DHS placement or foster care placement, you might think, oh, shelter, that qualifies under McKinney-Vento, but it actually does not because they are in the foster care system. And then that protection sort of supersedes the McKinney-Vento eligibility. So the key anyway, when you're trying to determine if a family qualifies, is hardship. So is their situation due to a hardship? So if I decide I want to go stay with a family member because maybe I want to save some money, or I just like that family member and want to live with them now, that does not qualify me. But if I go and live with that family member because I was evicted from my apartment because I couldn't pay my rent, then that does qualify me. So the key again is hardship when it comes to this. All right. And so, the other piece to think about is, what does the research say about this? So why are we concerned about this? And why are we making sure that we identify these students, right? It's really important because the research actually says that when we don't intervene and when we don't put supports in place, the outcomes are not great. And so that's why it's so important to be able to identify students and then be able to get them the supports that they need. So what does the research say? So we know that there are socio-emotional impacts of homelessness that sometimes present as behavior issues, especially in school. Students who might be sleep deprived and malnourished, they may have come to school and have a hard time focusing. If the reason for homelessness might be due to some type of domestic violence or family violence, there could be stress and anxiety that's related to that. Sometimes because of what's going on at home, if a child may have a hard time sitting still, they may act out. Again, that leads to that behavior issue that sometimes gets tied into it. Students who are going through homelessness are more likely to be bullied or threatened by their peers. And that number is even higher for our students who identify as LGBTQ. And older students, so I know we're sort of focused on the younger ones, the pre-Kers today, but older students, so those high school students, are more likely to hide their situation from others. And then, there are also impacts on academic success. So we talk about, that there are delays in language, literacy, and social emotional development when students are going through this. These students have a higher rate of truancy and suspension. And, these also, even when you are going through homelessness at a younger age, it puts you at risk for later academic problems, including not graduating high school. And then not graduating high school is actually the greatest risk factor for young adult homelessness. So it's just a cycle that continues unless, of course, we intervene in this, right? And one study that I often cite is that there was a study done in New York where students were suspended at over twice the citywide average if they were Black, and the students that are experiencing homelessness, that is. And in addition, these students were identified later than their peers as needing an IEP or special education services, which is obviously very problematic, because when a student is in need of those supports and they don't get them, that could turn into those behavior problems that lead to suspension, that lead to dropout, and all of those things that we just mentioned. All right. And then what do families share with us that, why, when they're going through this, why are they not coming to school? Why are they not coming to class? Well, they're worrying about basic survival. They don't have transportation. They don't know to ask that they don't know that that's an option, that we can provide that. Maybe they're bouncing around, and so they don't have a way to get to and from school. They may not have space to do work at home. So they may come to school, but then they don't complete their assignments, or they don't do their reading, or they don't do anything outside of it, because when they leave school, they may not have a safe space or a space at all to be able to do that kind of stuff. A lot of times they'll say, well, we didn't have the proper clothing. We didn't have uniforms to come, or we didn't have the supplies. Again, they may not realize that we can provide that, and we can remove that barrier. Students who are going through homelessness are also more likely to get sick if they're living in like a congregate setting. When you're around other people all the time, that gives you a higher chance of, catching a cold, catching the flu, catching COVID. And so when you're sick, then you stay home from school, you miss school. So another reason why they may miss school. And so, if you just think about it, it's just sometimes it's hard to make school the priority when you don't necessarily know where you're sleeping from day to day. And so again, our job is to sort of, figure out what the barriers are and get them removed so that the child can be in school and be successful. And then we also need to talk about school mobility. And that is when you have a student who transfers to many different schools over the course of a year. And we're going to talk about in a minute that we can advocate for a child to remain in their school of origin when they become displaced, because a lot of times that's their stability. And most likely they have built relationships with teachers, peers, other school staff. And so we can make sure that can remain the stability if it makes sense. Sometimes, though, it is in the best interest of the child to transfer to a school that's closer to where they are. But that is up to the family to decide. For example, if you have an older child, they may be able to, sit on the bus for a longer period of time, as opposed to, a kindergartner or even, a pre-K student. And so the other thing to keep in mind is if you also work with students in foster care, when a student is in foster care and they move around, there has to be a meeting with all parties involved to determine if it's in the best interest for them to transfer or to stay in their school of origin. With students who qualify under McKinney-Vento, no such meeting happens. It's really just up to the family and to the student. And they can make that determination. But the important thing is that they know they have that option. So that's where we come in, right? All of us, is to make sure that we can let them know that they have that option. So the law that I'm referring to is the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act, right? So this is federal law passed back in 1987. And it was also reauthorized under the Every Student Succeeds Act in 2015. And the gist of this law is that it provides immediate enrollment and educational stability for any student, child, or youth experiencing homelessness. And that's, through the definition that we talked about earlier. And this includes all students pre-K through 12th grade. Okay. And the second piece of it is removing barriers, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But what this law does is it provides federal funding to the states in order to support these students and support programs that work with these students. And the law says every school district has to assign a liaison to be the McKinney-Vento liaison to work with these students. Well, so the way that we do it in Philadelphia, because we are a very large city, we have every charter is its own school district or LEA, and there's about 80 some charters in our city. They each have a designated liaison. And then the school district of Philadelphia, because we couldn't just have one liaison, we have designated that the counselor in every school is the liaison. And we have a team, the ECIA team, who is located in central office to also help support. All right. And in Pennsylvania, there are 8 ECIAs around Pennsylvania. So it's divided into 8 regions. Philadelphia is region 1. And then we are just Philadelphia. So we're the only county in our region. The other 7 regions have a couple of counties that make up their region. So we're region 1, we have 8 ECIAs, and all the ECIAs talk to each other and collaborate as well. So that's just a little background for that. All right, so ECIA, or Education for Children and Youth Experiencing Homelessness. We are, like I said, located at central office at 440. And essentially our role is to help support the schools, help support the community in serving these students, and to make sure that we help to remove as many barriers as possible. And we also ensure that the law that I'm referring to is being followed. We serve sort of as a liaison between homeless providers and the schools and the different school district offices. We have various programming. So we have a virtual tutoring program. We have a teen program for high school youth. We do workshops for parents so that they know their rights. We do a ton of trainings for school staff, for community agencies. Our job is to spread awareness and make sure everyone sort of knows what this is and knows what the rights are, what the law is. And we're also responsible to make sure that all the students that qualify are identified and then connected to resources and services. And then we report our data to the Pennsylvania Department of Ed. And so, again, and that's why we're going to also talk about, if you do identify a student, how do we make sure that they are counted and that they are connected? And I'm going to share our contact information with everyone at the end of the presentation so that you can be able to reach out to us anytime that you need to. And so, of course, we're not going to go over the entire law today, but I want to talk about the 2 main points of the law that are very important, and that is the school of origin piece and the removing barriers piece. So the school of origin piece is, I mentioned this before, kids have the right to stay in their school of origin when they become homeless or displaced. Or they can transfer to the new neighborhood school or the new neighborhood district closer to where they are staying. And if they choose to enroll in the new neighborhood school or new neighborhood district, they don't need any documentation in order to enroll. And so this includes proof of residency, it includes immunization records, nothing. They do not need anything in order to enroll. If the youth is unaccompanied, remember we talked about this as those students who are not living with their legal parent or guardian, those students can enroll themselves without a parent or guardian. So if it's a high school kid, if it's that high school kid that ran away from home, they can enroll without a parent's signature. If it's that 6-year-old kid staying with grandma, obviously a 6-year-old's not going to walk into school and enroll themselves, but grandma can enroll that student even if she's not the legal guardian. And so the idea is, don't put any barriers in place for the student to get into school. Just do it. And then we worry about the other stuff later. Because grandma, who is caring for the 6-year-old, she may need to go down and file for custody and do all of that. And she will. But today she's going to enroll the kid in school, and we're not going to wait until she gets custody for that kid to be in school. All right. So that is and the law is federal, which means that if I am attending a Philadelphia school and I become displaced and now I'm living in Montgomery County, I can choose to go to the Montgomery County school, or I can choose to remain in my Philadelphia school. So it cross county, cross state, we have students who might now be living in South Jersey. As long as it's not crazy, like as long as it's not going to be like a 4-hour commute or a 3-hour commute, then we can make that happen for school of origin. All right, so that's and then board policy 251. If you're interested in what in the school district's policy around that, that's the policy around enrollment and supporting students in this situation. All right, so that's the first part of it. The second part is, all right, now that you're in school and we have that situated, how do we make sure that you are successful in school? Well, what are the barriers? that you have, let's remove them. So uniforms, we provide uniforms for any student who qualifies. The school counselor places the order and it gets shipped to the school. If you are a provider also, let's say you are from a shelter or from an agency that works with families, you can also place orders for uniforms and it can get shipped to your agency. So we can't place orders and ship to homes, but we can place orders and ship to different agencies, and then you could then provide that to the student. If you are from a shelter, we offer bulk ordering in the summer. So if you are from a shelter, you can order for every student in your shelter so that they can have those uniforms before school starts. And if you are not familiar with our uniform process and you need more information about that, I'm going to ask you to contact me after this, because I can talk to you about how we can get you involved in getting uniforms. Because also uniforms are pre-K also. Pre-K students are eligible for the uniforms. Also transportation. So we provide transportation if a student is living more than 1 mile from where their school is. That could be in the form of most likely a SEPTA pass, but in some cases it could be a yellow bus or a cab, depending on the situation. We also have a program called Emergency Funds, which is where we provide e-gift cards to students to purchase items that would remove a barrier for school. That gets ordered through the school. We also help with internet. So if a family is in need of a hotspot because they don't have internet wherever they're staying, we can assist with them getting that. And then we also just have various resources and provide referrals. So we do a coat distribution every October where we have a partnership with the Auto Dealers Association, and they provide us with brand new winter coats, and then we distribute them to schools and to community partners to then distribute to families or to students. This year, I think we're getting 9,000, so we'll be able to do that. If you do not get information from me, or you're not on my listserv, I'm going to drop a little Google form at the end in the chat so that you can sign up, so that you can receive emails from me. So when these kinds of updates happen, you would be able to get them if you're interested. And then referrals, like a lot of times, even we have families who come to us because they need shelter. And so we, make sure that they understand the process of getting into shelter. So those are the key points. And so, how do you determine if a kid is in fact eligible for these services? Well, it's not a whole big process. If you decide that they do, then they do. That's kind of how it works. If you now know about what this means and what qualifies someone, if you feel like they qualify, then they do. And once that determination is made, then the family is eligible for those services for the entire school year, or the entire length of homelessness if it goes beyond that school year. But students have to be identified each school year. So sometimes they happen to fall under this situation for, a couple years in a row due to whatever, the circumstances, and that's fine. They just have to be re-identified each year. And so what do we mean by identify? Well, if you're in a school, the counselor has to document it in our system, or if not, making sure that we are made aware of this student so that we can make sure that they get counted, and then again, connected to all these different resources.
Hey, Colleen, not
Yes.
to interrupt, but we have a couple questions in the
Sure.
chat. So one question is, could they be shipped? I'm guessing that's we're referring to uniforms. Could they be shipped to the home of a provider for delivery to the family?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we can't ship to the home of anybody. It has to be either to a school or an agency.
All right. And the next question is, transportation available for kids in pre-K that are in shelter?
Yeah. So if kids are in pre-K, we can do the same way, trans passes, or this is where the issue comes in, is we can provide a trans pass. However, the parent doesn't get provided the transportation. So a lot of times, especially if they're in shelter, we would say to the shelter, hey, can you provide transportation for the parent? We can provide for the student. Or the trans pass, if you're under a certain age, you can ride for free. So the parent can actually use it with the child, because they can't have the child go on their own. But transportation is a sticky situation. And Deborah can speak more to that and how we sort of work that. But transportation is always a sticky situation for the pre-Kers.
Okay, and the last comment was from Karen, which is a really good suggestion. Is there a way to share the PowerPoint that you and Deborah are going to be presenting today with everyone after the meeting?
I sure can, and I could actually just drop it in the chat when we're done.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, good questions. So enrollment, I just want to go over enrollment. Again, Deborah's going to talk about pre-K enrollment, but whenever you're working with a student who is in pre-K, they may have older siblings. And so it's important to sort of know the process for the K through 12 enrollment. So if a family we do enrollment now online. So that's new since COVID is online enrollment. It used to be you have to go into the school, fill out a paper, and then you show all your paperwork and then you get enrolled. Now everything's online. And so if the family is new to the district, then they complete this online enrollment. And what this does is it asks you in certain places to upload your proof of address, to upload your immunization records, all these things that are needed for enrollment. It says, please upload this. Well, if you are qualifying under McKinney-Vento, like I mentioned, you don't need all those things. If you have them, great, you upload them. If you don't, you can just upload something else in its place because you need to upload something to move on in the application. And so what we share with families is if you're working with an agency, have them just write a letter saying, hey, this family qualifies under McKinney-Vento. If you come through our office, we can write the letter. It doesn't have to be an official letter. You can, as just a parent, can write a letter, write something on a piece of paper that says, I qualify under McKinney-Vento, and just use that as a placeholder. And so if you are referring a family to enroll, make sure you tell them to speak to the counselor once they do get enrolled, because that's who's going to get them the uniforms and sort of talk to them about all these things that they're eligible for. And if the family is just transferring from one district school to another, they don't have to do that whole online enrollment. They just have to contact the school and request for them to transfer them to the new neighborhood school. And that school may say to them, hey, I need I need proof that you're in this new neighborhood school, or this new address. And again, if they disclose that they qualify under McKinney-Vento, or if they provide a letter, if they don't want to discuss it, what their circumstances are, they can provide a letter that just says, hey, McKinney-Vento, then that can be changed. If families are running into issues when they do this, I would say for them to contact us, because a lot of times, sometimes we have to intervene and make sure that things happen. So we are a good resource to share with families that if they are running into issues, that they can contact us. And updating the address is an important piece, because if they're enrolling in the new neighborhood school, it's important that the updated address gets put in the system, because otherwise correspondence and things will go to that old address, and that old address is connected to a different school, and so they can update that address when they're doing the transfer. And if they change their contact information too, making sure that they let the school know so the school can update that. We also have a referral form that's a Google form that you can have parents fill out. You can fill out if you want us to reach out to that family. And I'll put that in the chat at the end. I'll put a bunch of things in the chat at the end. And then just another thing to think about is if anyone's ever heard of a residency affidavit. A residency affidavit is something that often gets confused with McKinney-Vento eligibility. So we have a form at the district called a residency affidavit that is used when a parent or legal guardian of a student cannot provide two proofs of address for whatever reason, right? Maybe they are staying with somebody and so their name is not on the lease and bills, but maybe it's not a McKinney-Vento thing. Remember, I gave you that example. If I just decided to go move in with my sister, and because I wanted to, and because I like her and I want to save some money, but it's her name is on the lease, mine's not. That doesn't qualify me as McKinney-Vento, but I need to still be able to register my kid in school. So I'm going to fill out a residency affidavit that sort of proof that I live with my sister, and that I'm not on the lease. But if you qualify under McKinney-Vento, you don't have to do that residency affidavit. So that's an important thing to share with families, because a lot of times when they go, if they don't explain their situation, the school or may say, oh, you need to do this residency affidavit, and they do not if they qualify. What else? Okay, so that's around enrollment for K through 12, not pre-K. And then, you know, collaboration, you know, so, okay, how can you collaborate with us? Well, a couple things, you know, sharing this information with students and families. And again, if you're specifically working with pre-Kers, their families, there may be siblings who would be, you know, who would be interested in the other things for the K through 12. Hang a poster is something. So we have at our office, we have, you know, giant laminated posters that say, you know, hey, is this your situation? You know, we can help. Can you stop by here and pick up some posters and hang them in your agency or wherever, you know, where in your school, wherever you may be. You can also schedule us to come out and do a parent workshop at your site, if you are a site, where we, you know, sort of review this stuff with families and let them know what their rights are, let them know what they're eligible for. So Vivine is the person to email if you are interested in having that done at your site. So you know, making sure that we are just, you know, spreading the word. You know, we don't want people to say that they've never heard of McKinney-Vento. We want everyone to know what this means and to be able to share it with families. Any other questions in the chat?
Not seeing any other questions in the chat right now.
Okay, so here's our contact information. And I'm going to pass it over to Deborah. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to drop some of the things in the chat that I had talked about. So Deborah.
I'm sorry, I have a question.
Okay.
It didn't show up under the chat for some reason. I did type it in. But you mentioned like the services that are available to families, and you mentioned school districts and counselors, but for Head Start, to provide transportation and you know, the things that you mentioned to remove the barriers, is there specific funding through you that could be applied for, or is that something that the Head Start program has to provide through their grants?
Yeah, so when it comes to transportation, like I said, if it can be utilized through a TransPass, that can just be through our, like we work with the transportation department in the school district that sort of does the transportation for all charters and the district school. But Deb, are you can you talk a little bit about that, how you've removed that barrier before, because that is always a challenging piece.
Yeah, for the pre-K children, we give the parents trans passes and the pre-K children ride for free.
Yeah, because it's that sort of because SEPTA allows for younger kids to ride for free. It's like the way that we sort of get around it.
Okay, what do you mean by a trans pass? That's through the school district or the public transportation?
Yeah, a SEPTA trans pass.
Yeah, we
So
don't have
I'm
that
sorry.
word.
So it's the I'm sorry, yes, it's the public transportation. It's SEPTA is our public transit system. So the
Okay.
trans pass is like the pass that allows them to ride the buses, the subway, those type
Okay.
of things.
Thank you. And
Colleen.
where do you get the funding to get those things?
To get transportation just comes out of we have a transportation it doesn't come
Budget.
out of our funding. It comes through the school district.
Okay. Yeah, how does that work for Head Starts though? Like Head Starts that aren't in school districts. They're pre-K classrooms that are not in a school district.
Deb, do you guys work with those pre-Ks as well?
I mean, most of the Head Start pre-K is under us,
Yeah.
and we can get trans passes for those kids. But if they're outside of our grant, then the Head Start grant requires that we remove barriers. So even those Head Start grantees that are not associated with us, they're required to do something similar. But like, you'd have to speak to those agencies that are not associated with us to see exactly how they meet that requirement. They might be doing something else, because most of the other grantees that are in the area are much smaller than us. So they might have the ability to do a small van or something like that. I don't know. But it is within our grant to service these families. So because we are associated with the school district, we make use of the trans passes because that's what the district is doing. But any of the grantees that are not us, we would have to check directly with them on how they service those families.
Okay, we are currently serving the families, but a lot of times we end up, providing taxis or things like that, and it gets pretty costly. So I was just curious if there was any additional funding available other than the grants that we get for Head Start.
Yeah, and I'll just add, like, it's not just for transportation too. So like when I mentioned about our uniforms, right? So I was saying we provide this uniform package for any student who attends a district school or district pre-K. But what about those students who might attend a charter or one that is not connected to the district? We don't provide that for them, but that school is required under the law to remove that barrier. So they would they have their own set aside money to do that. And so I think it would be a similar situation. Erin, do you have your hand up?
I do. Hi, Colleen.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
You
Up to what an area that I frequently run into is with youth that are in non-traditional education programs past the age of 18. Does this go up to 21 years of age or 22 years of age for youth that are still engaged in high school or GED programs?
It does. It goes up to 21 because it's through 12th grade. So what then that age could be up to 21. So yeah.
Okay, thanks.
All right, there was one more question. Do you think we have time to answer it before you jump in, Deborah? It was from Sean. Are these resources available for adolescents that are involved with local children and youth and independent living program and placements?
Right. So that's when I was referring to that, students who are in foster care have similar protections under the law, but they are not qualified as McKinney-Vento. So for example, uniforms, right? So if you have a student who is in foster care who is in need of uniforms, so in Philadelphia, we would refer them to the Education Support Center through DHS or their CUA worker, their community umbrella agency worker, who can provide that uniform to remove those barriers. So when it comes to the foster care side, the agencies that are working with that student would be the ones to be removing the barrier. But unfortunately, it doesn't overlap. So and it's different funding. So the money that the items that we provide, the specific items, wouldn't necessarily we wouldn't be able to use that for a student who's in the foster care system.
Stephanie or Colleen, I can answer that from the emergency fund side of things because I work with that. So the DHS Emergency Fund and Prevention Fund have funds available directly for assisting with school needs. So if the provider just does an emergency fund application, it should be quickly approved and able to get the uniforms out to the youth as long as they just have to ask for it and specify that it's a school-related need.
Thanks, Erin.
All right. Thanks, Deborah. So you.
All right. Well, let me share my screen. And then we can get started. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Deborah Hartranft, and I am a senior project manager with the School District of Philadelphia. I specifically work with pre-K enrollment. So that's what we're going to talk about today with the lens of McKinney-Vento. I first wanted to just kind of like introduce my team. I'm not going to go through everyone because I don't want to spend a lot of time doing that, but I wanted to just let you know that I put all their email addresses on here as well as if they are bilingual or not, so that you can reach out to them if you need any assistance with enrolling any of our children. And all of our team is assigned specific centers and specific tasks, but no matter who you email, we'll be able to get it to the right person and resolve the enrollment. And each member of the team is trained around McKinney-Vento once a year, but it's also a constant topic on our team because we have many families that are coming in through intake that we identify on a daily basis. So we wanted to talk a little bit about why pre-K is important. And I really realized that I'm sort of preaching to the choir here, but I didn't want to miss the opportunity to kind of do our little push here. Pre-K is really significant in the overall education of a child. It improves early literacy, their language and their math, their social emotional skills, making them like the children that are reporting highest in kindergarten are the children that are have been to pre-K. It also reduces special education placement. It also reduces grade repetition, and it also increases the likelihood of high school graduation. Also, something that we don't often mention, but I really think is important when we're talking about our McKinney-Vento children, is that pre-K enrollment really increases educational stability, because we know that with educational stability and positive relationships with our teacher, this is a protective factor for our children, and it improves resiliency. And so when we think about how our McKinney-Vento children have so many risk factors that are going on in their lives, we really want to always give them as many protective factors as we can. And pre-K enrollment and educational stability is one of those. So where are we? We are all over Philadelphia. We have over 200 sites in every major geographical region. We're in both our schools, and we have a ton of community partners as well. And all of our sites are rated high quality by Pennsylvania standards. Program components of Head Start are, like you would guess, academic curriculum that's developmentally appropriate and meets all the academic standards. But we also have home visits. This is sometimes a little bit tricky with our McKinney-Vento families. Even families that aren't McKinney-Vento don't always want someone in their home. So we can do the home visits at the school or at another site, at a library. But we do this twice annually to discuss any of the needs of the child, but also discuss any of the needs and concerns of the family. We have a whole health and wellness program. We have a nurse assigned to every center. We also have special needs coordinators and mental health specialists. And so we do hearing and vision screening. We assist with dental appointments. We do developmental screening, mental health screening if approved by the parent. We also offer free breakfast, lunch, and afternoon snack, and do dietary adaptations. We have nutrition workshops for both children and parents. We have a whole team that's just dedicated specifically for children with special needs, and we work closely with Elwyn to ensure that our staff is following the IEP of each individual child, making sure that we can collaborate to get in any one-on-ones that are needed for some of our children, or if there's sometimes our children require a nurse that's there full-time with them. So we work closely with other agencies within the city to make sure that when the child starts, they have all the support that they need to be able to start the school year. Parent and family engagement is one of the most important parts of Head Start, because it's not just an educational program. It is a program about lifting up families. And so we have a whole team called the social service team that is dedicated entirely into supporting the family and giving them the tools and resources that they need to not only engage in the learning with their child, but also to get stability in their family, whether that's housing stability, food stability, education for the parent. There's a variety of things that our social service team does. We also encourage strongly for parents to volunteer in the classroom. We do tons of education workshops. One of the most recent ones that we did was around how to make sure that you have a living will, so that if something happens, that everything goes where it's supposed to go and everyone's taken care of. We also have something called a policy council. We have a shared governance in Head Start, where our parents have a huge say in what happens within the program. So every policy and every procedure that I create or that any administrator creates, we have to co-create it with our parents that are on policy council, and it has to be approved by them before we can enact it. So this is a wonderful way to have parents have ownership of the program. And it's a really important tool to make sure that we are servicing communities in the best way possible by having their voices be such an integral part of how the program is run. So eligibility, there are 3 factors that make somebody eligible. Philadelphia residency, age, they have to be 3 years old on September 1st, and income. So I have the income listed here, the guidelines for every program that's in Philadelphia. There are 3 different programs, not just Head Start. But the important thing to note here is that if a family is McKinney-Vento, their income is irrelevant, and the residency also, like Ms. Colleen said earlier, is irrelevant. If the family's been displaced and they're outside of Philadelphia, we can still service them within Philadelphia. However, we do need the child to be between 3 and 5 with that September 1st cutoff, because if not, then they need to go to kindergarten or to a higher grade, or maybe they need to use CCIS if the child is younger. We also have tons of documents that we require because we have to report to the federal government. But all of these requirements are waived if the family is McKinney-Vento. So again, it's important for us to screen those families. When we do an interview, we screen families to see if they are categorized as McKinney-Vento. And the important thing is that when, I think I'm gonna, hold on. Yes, okay. So when we do have parents apply, so there's 5 different ways to apply, whether they do it online, if they do a paper application in person, or if they come to an event that's not at the district. We have both our application and our online process has a series of questions about living situation that allows us to screen the parents. And the team is trained really well about how to make sure that we are using the correct language when we speak to our families. So we don't use the word homeless, and we typically also don't use the word McKinney-Vento because our families don't typically know what that means. We as a staff know what that means, and we talk about their living situation. So anytime a parent indicates in any way, shape, or form that their living situation categorizes them as McKinney-Vento, we let them know immediately that we don't need all the documents, that we're going to get them enrolled within the week, and we start working with them quickly. We also let them know immediately that there are other services for them through the ECHIA office, and we talk about how there are many families that are in similar living situations and they take advantage of these services. So we use very specific language that avoids stigmatizing our families. We use the language that the family uses actually. So if the family says, oh, I had to move in with my uncle because I got evicted, then that's the language we use. We say, oh, many of our families have to move in with other family members because of eviction. It's a really, the renting is really rough out there these days. There's a lot of services for you. If you're interested in taking advantage of them, we can help you out. So that's how we screen our families. And it's really worked with us. We get a lot of families that are living doubled up. That's the majority of the families that we get when we are doing our intake process. So what do we do? As in addition to the fact that we train all of our staff, and we have our applications all geared towards asking the right questions around living to make sure that we can screen our families and capture them correctly so we can get them all the services they deserve. What are some of the other collaborative efforts that we do? We attend all of these meetings, all of these children work group, early childhood conferences, so that we can get to know other agencies and other staff working with the same families so we can brainstorm around how can we do this better. We work very closely with the Bell Project. We've done self-assessment tools, not only of our program, but also of the shelters. And so we've crossed that, which is really helpful to get shelter staff view of our program and vice versa to get educational feedback. in the shelters. And through working closely with the Bell Project, we've actually been able to get OHS data from the city so that we know how many age eligible children are in each shelter around the city. They give us approximate, they're not allowed to give us exact numbers, but even with that approximate, what it allows us to do is, one, follow up over and over and over again, send staff out to build relationship with these families so that we can get them in school, because we know that trust is one of the biggest issues. So we need to get our staff out there to those shelters to speak to parents. It also allows me to hold spots. So the grant with Head Start allows us to hold spots for McKinney-Vento families up to 30 days. So if I know how many children are age eligible and McKinney-Vento eligible in that area, I can go ahead and hold those slots, and I can report those slots as full because I'm holding them. So this is a really, really amazing thing that we've been able to work out with the city and through our collaboration with the Bell Project, because it makes sure that I don't fill up a center when there are McKinney-Vento children right next door. I just didn't know about them. We also work very closely with ECHIA, with Colleen and the office upstairs. We share data with them as well. Anytime they have a family that comes in through their office for older children and they note that there's a younger children, they send it over to us and vice versa. So we make sure that we're not missing anyone. And we've been doing uniform ordering with them where we get backpacks and uniform for all of our kids. We just this summer did a huge bulk uniform ordering with them, and we're now sorting all that out to make sure we get it to our children before the start of school. We work very closely with the Philadelphia Immigrant Education Collaborative. This is a collaborative that also meets monthly, and it includes agencies like HIAS and NSC. And they specifically are working with refugee and asylum seeking parents. And that way we can make sure that we are enrolling those children and counting them as well. And they do the same thing with us. They will send us information on children that are age eligible that need to be enrolled. So we make sure that we don't miss anyone. So even if the family hasn't filled out an application yet, we know like what school they're interested in, and I know to hold a spot. So that's one of the biggest things is sometimes because the families are displaced, there's a lot of things going on, and pre-K enrollment might not be top priority. So working closely with these other agencies where they can just give us a quick heads up of like, hey, we have 3 babies that are interested in this center. We're working on the applications. I can go ahead and hold those spots, even though I don't know the kids' names, even though I don't have an application. It really helps us service the families and make sure that we're not filling up slots when those children need to be coming in. Lastly, I just want to mention that we have started a hands-on mobile enrollment team here within our office, and it is a group of family service workers and social workers that are specifically dedicated to making sure that we service our McKinney-Vento families in the best way possible. And what we're hoping that they're going to start doing this year is being more present within our shelters. So again, like I said earlier, to build more trust with families and with staff so that families feel comfortable bringing their children to our schools. So that's one of the things that we're looking forward to this coming year. And I wanted to just have, this is our website and our phone number. And also on the previous slides, you can see my direct email too, if you ever need to email me. And I will send this presentation out to everyone. I'll also put it in the chat like Miss Colleen did. Does anybody have any questions? I know that was a lot and very fast.
Yeah, Melissa says she loves the idea of the mobile team. I think the mobile enrollment team is a great idea also. Awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. We're also starting to enroll at our sites this year. For the past almost 10 years, we've only done enrollment here at 440. And then because of COVID, we started doing online enrollment, but it still doesn't meet the needs of everyone because many people can't come down here to 440 for a variety of reasons. And many people don't have access to do enrollment online. It's just, it's not feasible for a lot of people. So what we've started to do is, starting on the 22nd, next week actually, we're doing this whole big push that you can go to your local Head Start center at the schools and enroll at the schools, rather than having to come to 440. But in addition to that, we also wanted this group of family service workers and social workers to be mobile, to go straight into the shelters to build those relationships. And I'm hoping that that proves to be really successful.
Awesome. Thanks, Deborah. All right, Markia, would you like to close us out?
Sure. So our next meeting will be on September 16th. Of course, you'll get information about that, registration information ahead of time. Want to thank both of our presenters for this wealth of information, and also all of you who contributed. So hopefully people saw some of the items in the chat. I know Edie put in some information about early intervention. And Colleen, hopefully you saw all of the information that she presented on, as well as a referral form and a document you can be added onto her listserv so you can keep getting updates. Okay. And Deborah just put her her presentation in the chat as well, and we'll make sure they go out as well. We'll send everything out as well since we recorded this. Okay. Anybody have any last minute burning questions? All right, we're going to end early today then. Everybody has a wonderful weekend. Stay safe because COVID is still out here in these streets for sure. The numbers are definitely rising. So, stay vigilant. And we will see you all in September. Thank you again for your participation and all your positive. And so in the chat there, okay, somebody's just saying we need access to the presentation. Does that mean click on it, you're not able to access it, or you just didn't see it in the chat? Looks like they may not be accessible. So Colleen and Deborah, make sure they're, whatever that setting is in Google Docs.
Yeah, mine is open for anyone can view it. So it should be.
Colleen, yours was able to be downloaded
Okay.
immediately. Deborah, yours required permission. So if you just
change the settings.
Okay. All right, perfect. Deborah just changed the settings. So everybody should have access to hers as well. Okay. Well,
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for all the info. All right.